Hi guys, welcome back to another weekly Assault stream. My name is Rybot01 and I have with me Dr. Darold Higa. I always say that.
Yeah.
Yes, he is our narrative
designer.
There you go. And we are going to talk about the newly introduced War Stories. We released update 4.4 this past Tuesday, along with other goodies. But because War Stories is actually a key point on the update, we brought Darold to talk about War Stories and all the information that went behind it. I find it fascinating because it was separated into three different stories, and they're all very different. But, you know, as I was playing them and also reading the paperwork, there's a lot of, I wouldn't say story, but a lot of emotion behind them. Because they are all different goals, and it's about personal decisions too.
Right.
But yeah, we're going to get into that. It's super interesting. I'm so happy you're here. Looking forward to hearing more information about it. And for all of you watching, and in the forums especially, I mentioned a couple weeks ago that we were going to run two contests in the forums. One was based on you sharing your high score in the forums, and the winner was going to win a Sabaton autograph poster.
Oh, awesome.
Along with a Prima Victoria tank, and then 5 other lucky winners were going to get the Prima Victoria tank. So I have the winners.
Oh, that's a nice.
So the winner for the Prima Victoria tank and the Sabaton autograph poster is the Monster 17. Congratulations.
Congrats.
Yes, and then we also have the other 5 winners, which is Winter Fox 93, COTH 56, 8th The Man, Stupid Luchador. Great name, great name, by the way. And then Darth Scarf X. So congratulations to all of our 5 Prima Victoria winners.
Congrats, guys.
Yeah, I know. Because we received a lot of submissions, I want to give away a couple other things to players that send out their really cool high scores. So I'm going to give them a token. They're not going to know what it is until they see it on their garage. So I'm going to give these random players 44 Warlock of Muffins, Vincent Random, Max Shaw, Yeller Belly, Mash, and Bob Matning. They're going to have something special on their garage upon their logging. So thank you so much for participating, and congratulations.
Cool, congrats.
Yay. And then the second contest, I even have my cheat sheet right here, was based on photography, now that we have the replay system in game. And the challenge was to capture an image based on nature. No tanks were allowed, and no human elements, meaning buildings, roads, or anything like that. So we actually have the images that Architect Extraordinaire is going to be showing on screen right now. They were all very beautiful and interesting, and I feel like it kind of shows the beauty of the game. If you're not focusing too much on, you know, destroying each other's tanks, it's pretty cool. So do we have a couple images to show?
Yeah, it's interesting because, like, I actually, when I was looking over her shoulder, I was like, you know, I'm so busy playing, I don't even notice some of these things. It's really absolutely beautiful.
So that image, that first image is from Apache Native, and then the next one, let's see. There we go. That image is from 8th The Man, which is pretty cool. I really love that one. And next we have Bad One Rabbit. Oh no, that one's Badass Weed. I mean, geez, your gamer tag is great. Let's see. Oh yeah, that one is from Bad One Rabbit. And that's from Black Bull First. This is from Broke One. He's actually a foreign player who's helping us a lot. So shout out to Broke One. CPL Darren. And yeah, that was pretty cool. I mean, those are the waterfalls for Liberty Falls. There you go. You know what? We picked our winners randomly, but personally, this was my favorite. I don't know why I like the fish. And this comes from the Brutal Loser. So, congrats.
I'm so busy playing. I didn't even realize we had fish. I'm gonna look for them.
Now, this one's just outrageous because when I saw it, I had to take a look, and it looks real. It definitely looks real, and this comes from Fed Up Fed. Thank you, Fed Up Fed, for your contribution. And then we have Ibrox04. That's a beautiful image. Dun, 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 dun. Then we have Ice Frogger 1313. Lots of birds. Then here we go, another bird from Mashman 90. And that one is brilliant. It's from player Maroon. Look at that bunny smelling flowers. And then we have Up Muffins. Gotta love your gamer tags, guys. That is fantastic. This image comes from Pupas95. And then we have Sentence. And another aerial view from Storm Draft. Ta-da! And Striker Rod. Great image. And then following more birds, Tyrok. Congratulations, Tyrok, for having your submission selected for the slide. And then Tall Desert 344226. Bum bum. And then this one's score is from Tarman77. And then the last image on our slide is from Youngsters Bike 679. Thank you all of you for sending us your submissions. But I do have the list of winners right here, and the winner is CPL Darren. We also have Maroon, and that was the image with the bunny smelling the flower. That was very cute. And then Storm Draft, congratulations. Striker Rod and Tall Desert 344226. All you 5 tankers are going to get a couple days of premium and a tank in your garage.
Cool.
So thank you very much. I do have to say that there was one image where the entire art team saw and they're like, oh, that was our favorite. And that was from Bad Rabbit. And that was the rabbit that's kind of running away from the snow. That's the Olympic rabbit.
Olympic rabbit,
yeah. There was a video from one of our community players who sent us of this rabbit running across the field, and all of a sudden, I don't think like bunnies have collision for the environment.
Yeah.
So instead of going through the rock, he jumped the rock higher than maybe 2-3 tanks, and then landed and then jumped again. So something happened with the game Collision and the bunny that...
super bunnies. No,
yeah,
we just breed super bunnies.
I guess. Yeah. They're World Tanks bunnies. So congratulations. Thank you all of you for your submissions. I'm going to toss this paper to the side.
Congratulations.
Yes. And I guess now we can focus on war stories. So again, as we mentioned, we had 3 new chapters introduced on 4.4. And I wanted to go through each and one of them and kind of discuss, you know, what went behind them. So let's just start with the first one, which is Spoils of War, Cyber Ritter. Okay. So can you talk a little bit more about war stories?
So I'm going to introduce all 3. So all 3 share the same sort of alternate universe. You know, again, we're like playing with alternative history for war stories, and in this case, we wanted to play around with the theme of, you know, making decisions and choices about being in the military. I mean, it's a big, no matter which military you serve in, right? You're making a decision, unless you're drafted, I suppose. You're making a decision to serve, and you know, you're usually fighting with purpose. We wanted to play around with that theme a little bit and explore some other aspects of why people fight. And one thing that sort of came up is, well, what if you're thrown into a situation where you have to make a very difficult decision? So that was kind of the theme that we had running here. And so to set it up, normally when I say, you know, when I talk about alternative history, I always say, oh, there's that one event that might have gone a different way. To set up this universe, we decided to make World War II go on much longer than it normally, you know, beyond its, you know, historical end date. And the idea is that because World War II continued going on and on and on, it created a whole different kind of global atmosphere, and people were very weary of war, and the decisions that were being made weren't always the right decisions, and because of that, it made, it basically sets up the narrative, from a narrative point of view, it kind of opened it up so that we can have these characters that can still be concerned about people, but make critical decisions that might historically have seemed very different. So that's kind of the backstory. So to justify all that, so this is backstory that no one will ever see. This is all in my notes and everything else, but it kind of makes sense to talk about it here, because the whole idea here is that what sets off this whole thing is that in this sort of timeline, 1942 did not progress. Yeah, I'm already going back to 1942, so you can see how this changes everything. But went back to 1942, and 1942 unfolded very differently from the way it did, you know, in real history. And kind of starting with the premise that the Battle of Midway did not quite happen the way that it did, and that basically Japan did not lose its entire carrier force. And because of that, America focused on fighting the Pacific War first instead of fighting the European War. And that was basically a strategic decision that was made. So because that decision was made, that has a lot of ripple effects in terms of how the Eastern Front plays out and basically how the conduct of war plays out. And the argument that I make is by focusing on a Pacific War and Japan not immediately losing most of their carrier fleet, it causes the war to drag out a lot longer. Inevitably, in this storyline, the Allies win. But it takes them an extra several years for that consequence to happen. And because of that, soldiers and military and everything else, basically civilians start to grow really weary of the war because, I mean, it's already cost so much. And now the war is going on and on and on. And basically what you see happening is all the countries, all the combating nations involved start making very poor decisions, and discipline in the military starts kind of falling apart. And that gave us room to let the characters express themselves more, and not, you know, so that you're not immediately asking, well, why isn't this character doing X or Y? But we're trying to set up that situation. So that's the background for all this. Sorry, that was long, but
and you know, it kind of makes sense because when you are in multiplayer in the other modes, it's all about the tank, but now it feels like it's more about the character and the choices behind them.
Right, and you know, it was one of those things too, because like early on when we were doing war stories, I honestly was really concerned because I said, well, we really need to focus primarily on the history and not the characters. But I think one thing that we learned from, you know, Runaway Tiger is that people are interested in hearing stories about. I mean, granted, you're not seeing this character all the time. You're not controlling an avatar. You're still experiencing this through a tank, but people were interested in the backstory, so it was good. So that gave us a little bit more freedom and flexibility to explore some of these themes. So the whole point of that is that because 1942 unfolds and the war lasts longer, that we see that the war is now kind of reaching the same end that it did in 1944, 1945, except now we fast forwarded to 1948. And the 47, 48, the war drags on. And basically, in Seven Ritter, which is, Seven Knights in German, and this is playing off of Seven Samurai, if you've ever seen that movie. That's kind of the theme here, to give a hint, is that we have basically a German tank commander on the Polish, well, it's sort of, the town is on the German border with the Soviet Union, and basically it's a German town that's about to be invaded by the Soviets. And the Soviets have already marched their way and are approaching this town. And German High Command orders this unit to go back to Berlin to defend Berlin. And the townsfolk don't want that. They're really afraid. The war has dragged on. A lot of atrocities have been committed on both sides, and they're very, very concerned about the fact that this German military unit, which is already stationed for its defense, is now retreating. So the mayor comes to I don't want to give too much away, but basically the mayor comes with a proposition to this tank commander, and he has to make a decision. And that's sort of the basis of Seven Ritter.
And when it comes to war and the choices that were made, I mean, historically, there were a lot of instances where a lot of soldiers were there to follow orders, but they're, internally as a human being, there comes a time where you have to say, should I follow orders or should I just go with what I currently feel right now? You know, a lot of scenarios depended on people making those choices.
Right, and it's really interesting because history, people who study history love to talk about sort of history as the movement of large number of people and sort of the unfolding of events kind of at the biggest scale. But really what conflicts are lots of little, conflicts and lots of little decisions that are being made. Oh, you know what? Jeff's comment from the last stream, should we address that?
Oh my God, what? Are we interrupting this amazing conversation for that? Come on.
Right.
Okay, so what I'm reading is lots of questions about Daryl's least favorite tank. Thanks, Jeff Gregg.
All right. Okay, so I was actually watching normally I mean, like sometimes I'm watching the stream, sometimes I'm not because I have a meeting around that time. But I was actually watching the stream, the 4-4 launch stream, and then I heard that I'm like, that's actually a really hard question because you don't want to pick a tank that you don't play, right? So it's got to be a tank you play, and if you don't like it, why would you be playing it? So I had to think long and hard, and I decided that for me that would be the VK4502B, because when yeah, I know it's a very specific, it's a very obscure tank too, but well, it's very specific. But I'll explain the rationale. Is that
do tell.
it used to be on the mouse line. Okay, early on when we first started, it was on the line to get them out. So it's a Tier 9 German heavy tank, and it's the last tank before the mouse. So of course it means it's a Tier 9, which you're going to be playing for a long time. It's a very interesting tank in that it's one of these Henschel designs, sort of like the E75 or the E100, except Porsche. It's a Porsche design, excuse me. Porsche had two designs. One with the turret up front, which is the configuration that we tend to think of, or mid-hull, right? And then this one was a configuration with it in the back. So here it is. You've been playing heavy tanks, and you've been playing very similar heavy tanks up to this point. All of a sudden, you have a heavy tank. This was before the armor buff, too. And so what happened is that you have this turret in the back, and all of a sudden, you're relearning how to fight because you cannot fight in the same way before.
So it's kind of throwing you off with
the
style of the
because it's like if you try to creep forward, especially like urban warfare and things like that, it's like it's such a long tank, and now it's much better because it has a lot more frontal armor, but then you can't really you can't peer around corners, and I'm more of a medium tank player, but I would really want a mouse. So anyway. So to answer Jeff Gregg's question, I think he's actually in a meeting right now, but it's the VK4502B.
Fails at challenge or whatever it is
yeah.
that he was
So anyway,
to do.
yeah, thank you for asking that question. And then you have to bug him now because he said he's gonna.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to bug him. And then John Stevens, what's your favorite tank? He's gonna say the M3 Lee.
Yeah, no. I just think that
I know you defend the M3 Lee a lot.
I defend it a lot. Yeah, I think it gets attacked a lot. Well,
do you owe the M3 Lee money or something? Why do you defend it so much?
Well, no, it's a much maligned tank. I think it's actually a pretty good tank. But anyway, its weakness is, of course, the turret configuration. But so I've said this before in other streams, and I think I even talked about it during one of the extra live streams. I really like the Panzerkampfwagen 4 because, and this is for pure history reasons, is that you read a lot of German Panzer commander memoirs. I think I've said this before, but you read a lot of their memoirs, and they said, oh, you had the Tigers and you had the Panthers, and they were very advanced tanks, but a third of them would be in repairs at any given battle. So even though on paper they might have had, 50 of them, like 30 of them were, or even 20 of them were combat capable. The thing that they said is that the Panzer IVs, particularly by mid to late war, the Panzer IVs were so mature that they were extremely reliable. They were always there. And so I think for German tanks, see, I'm wimping out, but for German tanks, that's definitely my favorite.
There's a lot of variations. But I also like the T-34.
I also love the T-34-76, just because historically that was a tank that won the war. And so, a lot of Sherman fans are probably already
Darold
targeting
Higa
me.
quote, that was the tank that won the war.
But, honestly, that bore the brunt of the Eastern Front armored warfare. And, and the Sherman, the Sherman was designed to be a sort of a multi-role tank. And to me, the T-34-76, from its numbers, just kind of had so much more of an impact. And if you read all the stories about its production and everything else, it's just amazing. Moving all the production, basically from the threatened military regions all the way across the Urals and everything. The whole story of the T-34 is fascinating.
There you go. Barry Banks, he says that he loves war stories and he wishes that in the future we had more history added to it. I don't know how much more history you're going to get in there.
Well, yeah, and that's actually a very good point. I mean, that is two ways to take war stories. And like, for instance, I think people don't realize this, but Brothers in Armor actually is more historical than alternative history, because that one is based on the Battle of Romania. The only thing that we inserted was the idea that an American tank commander would be in command of the crew. Training a crew up. I mean, that probably happened, to be quite honest, but I don't think we have any documentation of that. The documentation that we do have from that is actually of Russian commanders, and they did have to deal with some Soviet commanders, and they did have to deal with American contractors that were kind of providing the supplies, but I don't think that necessarily that we actually had an armor commander.
Going back to the Spoils of War, the first one, Simon Ritter, on the game itself, we introduced a new feature, or I would say a new challenge within the game, which is defense towers.
Okay.
Can you talk a little bit about it?
Sure, yeah. So the defense towers, I think the idea here is that we've talked about these for a long time, and I thought it would be very interesting. Pillboxes and literally, you might not run into pillboxes as much historically, but I think pillboxes for our game sort of not only represent the pillboxes that you would find sort of like in defensive positions, you know, like a beach, like Normandy, right? Or something where you would expect heavy cement fortifications. But they're also sort of representative of anti-tank guns, right? So I think that they fill both roles, sort of in terms of the historical, what they actually represent, right? Because most of the handheld infantry weapons, once you get past a certain tier, probably are not too effective, right? Like, so you had like anti-materiel rifles and things like that, but most of those really would only penetrate early war tank armor. So really, unless you're talking about anti-tank guns, there were other than other tanks or aircraft, there was really very little that could threaten tanks. And so I think that's kind of the role of pillboxes. And they're really interesting now because they not only do you have the mobile component, but now you have these fixed emplacements that you have to deal with. And if you haven't played the War Stories yet, I think, you know, let us know how you feel, but I think that they add kind of a cool element to the whole war story.
Yes, we do have feedback threads in the forum specifically for War Stories, so make sure you hop in. Changing the tier in War Stories would affect the level of performance for the defense towers in War Stories?
Their scale.
Okay, perfect. Yeah. There we go.
I better double check that with those guys. But last I heard, they were scaled. So.
We're going to say something.
Oh no, I was going to say, and then we can talk about the other ones too.
Yes.
I don't want to forget about that.
I wanted to answer Lasso's Martin. Why not War Story War Words? We do have the bundle available for 24 hours after you finish War Stories. There's going to be a tank available for you for sale for gold at a very good discounted price. So a lot of players have been taking advantage of all the War Story tanks we offer after you finish War Stories. So check that one out. And now we're going to move into Spoils of War Connoisseur.
Yeah.
You know what? This one, as I was playing it and also reading the background information, I think it's actually one of my favorites because maybe you're going to talk a little bit about it, but I'll just say how I feel about this chapter. As many people who are interested about history and all, there was a lot of destruction about valuable artifacts. Yeah. And a lot of fantastic pieces of art are completely gone and destroyed. And that is a loss that cannot be recovered. It doesn't really matter, you know, in what position you are or what side of the war you're on. These are very valuable. So for me, that was very interesting to see the effect and the introduction of this part in War Story. So can you talk about a little bit about the information background and, you know, how we have, you know, this very specific crew, Frank Martinez, added to War Story.
So what we wanted to do with the Connoisseur was the idea was that this was a guy who was basically being ordered, in the process of being ordered to take, to basically attack a German HQ, level a building with artillery because it was just too costly to try to go into the city and root them out. And so the decision was made to just level that building. Well, as it turns out, you know, Martinez finds out that it's actually filled with art treasures, and says, "Oh no, we're not going to level this." And so we said, you know, we're gonna fight it out against his orders, and basically, you know, try to, you know, basically instead of following his orders and just leveling this thing with artillery, he was going to actually attack and try to capture these pieces of art. You know, art repatriation and you know, sort of seizing and everything else was a big thing. I mean, that was an aspect of the war. And actually, you know, now I think in fiction now we've seen movies come out about it and things like that. So it's not like something that's hasn't been dealt with at all. But I thought it was an interesting angle to take. Is that what we normally think of the dilemma as, you know, saving lives, and that's or, you know, protecting something, and that's also cool. But there are things other than people that are also interesting. They're cultural artifacts. These are irreplaceable in some cases. Oh. Well, I'll be honest, a lot of things that we're talking about here are the background.
Yes, this is the
This is
information
not
that
how
you're
it-
going to see.
What actually unfolds is quite a different matter. So
Elmer Rogan said, "Whoa, spoiler alerts! I've not
Okay.
played War Stories yet, but you know, this is part of the brief introduction when you go to the select story mode on War Stories. So we're not spoiling anything,
yeah.
any
It's in
gameplay
that
or
little
footage
blurb
or
that
anything.
You're gonna read when
Yes,
you're about to
so
select it, so.
but it's
But
more,
sorry about that. But I didn't mean to cause any.
it's more the
concern or anything
background.
like that. Yeah,
we're talking about the background.
Yeah, sorry.
Go on.
No, so anyway, so that was sort of the premise there. So, and again, because I don't want to go too far beyond that's sort of the setup for that one.
Yeah, I mean, gosh, there's so many. I watch a lot of. I'm a PBS fan, so I watch a lot of documentaries and about artifacts, and even up to recently, there's still artifacts being discovered that were,
Yep.
you know, written as lost. Now they're found, but you know, when it comes to art, I feel like they belong to the world. I don't personally feel like they belong to any nationality or any region. These are contributions by humans to future generations.
Right.
So I find those priceless.
Yes. Yeah. And you know, to this day, this is actually very controversial. You know, governments are still fighting over pieces of art that changed hands in wars hundreds of years ago. So this is not something that's, you know, specific to World War II actually. And there's a question about Monument Men. Yeah, actually, there's actually a bunch of different movies that you could think of, and it's not just that one. See, if I say which other movies, then that might actually be a spoiler. So I think I'll leave it at that.
Oh,
but definitely, that was part of it. But then I think there are other movies that it also kind of borrows from.
Tim Kiss, he was asking if the mission was inspired by Monuments Man.
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
Dun, dun, dun. Okay, so we can move on to the next one. Well, do you want to, or do you have any final thoughts on Kanuzura?
No, I think again, I think people will once they play it, they'll get the rest of the story. But I mean, that's sort of the idea behind that. Is you know, what if there are other things in the world that we also want to protect? I guess that's a good way to put it.
And then the final war story that was introduced on Update 4.4 is Spoils of War Potemki. This one is interesting because it actually introduces artillery into the chapters.
Yeah, this was a little controversial because we weren't sure how we're going to make this work. But you know, we've you know, a lot of times people have been asking about it, like, and you know, full transparency, because I'm not the guy designing the scenarios. I'm only writing the stories. But they said, hey, what if this was artillery? And I said, if we can do it, that would be awesome. Honestly, I tend to be a medium tank player, medium to heavy tank player. So I'm mostly a scout and probe type guy or spotting guy. But I'm usually not the one not playing the artillery. And so recently I've been playing a lot more artillery. And I have to admit, working on this one kind of, it reminded me of the fun that is artillery. And I think, you know, and I realize artillery is extremely divisive.
You just said fun and artillery, and a lot of players are like, you're putting those two in the same sentence.
Right, I know, and that's a very divisive statement. But what I'll say to you, all of you out there who maybe don't like artillery or have never played artillery, Spoils of War. Now you're playing, you know, you're not playing, you know, you might be playing with a friend in co-op mode, but you're not playing in a multiplayer battle. Try it out, because, you know, that type of gameplay, it's a very different type of gameplay. It's kind of like, it's very controversial. It's kind of like World of Warships. If you're a carrier player versus, see, like World of Warships is a good example because I play destroyers and carriers, which is almost like playing light tanks and artillery in our game. You know, where you have this big contrast in game styles. But it was interesting to me because I hadn't played artillery in a long time, and working on this thing, it reminded me of some of the interesting choices that you have to make as artillery. I think Jeff Gregory talked about the fact that also because artillery, you know, the long reload times and everything else, for the sake of this game, the explanation is sort of we're simulating a whole battery here. We're not just simulating a single artillery piece. But basically, this is, you know, a war story where you get to play as artillery. And this is a class that isn't played as much. You know, so I think it's just something interesting. And, you know, you're playing it in a single-player environment. So give it a try, you know, hey.
The Toshka tank that was used on this war story, it was based on the Object 261. Were the other candidates in artillery that were submitted for this chapter?
We wanted to focus on Soviet artillery, and we wanted it to be relatively high tier. But then the dilemma with high tier is, of course, really long reload times, and having a game where you only shoot twice the whole time would be
Autoloader.
Yeah. Well, that's why it'll be interesting. I think even artillery players might get a kick out of this one because of the way that the tank was rebalanced for the single players. And now, I don't want to give too much away about the gameplay. So
yeah, because God forbid we say have spoilers.
I don't want to, but we'll stop there. But I think it's interesting because you're playing from a different perspective. And again, this is a single chapter. And again, this is actually the first time you get to play as a German in Seven Ritter, and this is the first time you get to play as a Soviet player in Potemkin. And Potemkin was an interesting choice. This one I feel like I'll give away less because I think that's kind of an important part of the decision here. But this is more about a decision that a Soviet artillery captain is forced to make in terms of some civilians that are in his area of operations. And if this is maybe a spoiler if you know your Russian cinema really well, Soviet cinema really well, but this is actually Potemkin. The choice of the Potemkin as a name refers to Battleship Potemkin, which is Eisenstein's great film. It's funny, too, because maybe even if you're a film buff, you may or may not have heard of it. It's influenced a lot of films, like American films.
Elmer Rogan, I always heard about the horrors of war and the fun language. How do you keep the stories PG-13?
Censorship.
Elmer Rogan.
We have to be very careful. Oh, actually, I'll be honest. Oh, see, no, that's a spoiler. I can't talk about that. But so one thing that we have to do is that we do want to make sure that this is accessible because, particularly on the console, you do want to make sure that this is, everyone can have fun. So we do have to be careful about that. Language, we can't do anything about what people say. I'll be honest. If you're on there, you know what I mean. Although, if someone's a repeat offender, they do get reported. But a lot of the times what we have to do is, in the tank game itself, you notice that you don't actually see humans running around. There's a reason for that, right? That's part of that is that rating. And also in terms of the story and the language, we just make sure, although we're doing this comic book format, and if you actually look at the comics that are released by Dark Horse, because that has an audience and a target range, their language they can be a lot stronger. But the language that you will see in the war stories are a lot more toned down, and we do that deliberately. I mean, we still want to capture the flavor of history, but we do have to be very careful about that kind of stuff. So we don't always put that in there, although it does happen.
Thank you for the question.
That's a good question.
Please send your questions for Daryl regarding war stories, and we can answer them. Aaron Meyer said, Daryl, you seem like a very nice guy.
Oh, well, thank you. I don't know about that, though. You asked my friend.
What? We have to bring your friends in for a stream so they can share all Daryl's secrets.
Maybe that won't be. Maybe people won't have quite the same opinion.
Dun dun. Let's give away some codes. I keep dropping my key card. There you go.
I was going to say, that's a smart move because every time I forget.
Yeah, I'm just going to take them out of the notepad.
If I wore it, it would even be worse because it would just be this giant
I'm going to lock myself out of my own office. So let's give away some codes because it's War Stories. We just released 4.4 and you're here. I want instead of doing 7 days of premium, let's give away 14 days of premium. How about that? 14 days of premium plus 1 million silver plus 30 consumables.
Wait,
do you want to do that?
Can I get this?
Not you, but our viewers.
All right, okay, fine.
I'll pass you a code. So we're gonna select 3 winners, and all you have to do is type in which one of Spoils of War is your favorite war story.
And if you haven't played it yet, it's Seven Ritter, The Connoisseur, and Potemkin.
There you go. So drop in Facebook chat which one is your favorite, and 3 lucky winners are going to get, again, 14 days of premium, 1 million silver, and 30 consumables. So, yeah, we got really fancy codes.
Fancy codes.
Thank you for the people in Wargaming Europe. Thank you.
Oh, is that where we got the fancy codes?
Oh, we got tons of codes. Those guys rule. They're making
awesome.
Yeah, I know. Dun, dun, dun.
I like fancy.
So, out of the 3 you worked on all of these, which one is your favorite, or which one do you think it's like that is the one?
I'll be really honest. I've been pushing us to have a story with a German soldier and a story with a Soviet soldier for a very, very long time. So now it's hard for me to pick between the two. I think Potemkin, because it's very different. Because it's an artillery mission, it plays very differently. Oh, and this is a tribute to our level designers. Potemkin is an artillery mission. So of course, once you unlock challenge mode, you can play it as artillery. You can also play it as regular tanks. So they had to work really hard to make sure that you could play, our challenge mode, once you go through story mode and unlock it, you can then come back and play whatever tank you want. So they had to think really hard and work really hard to make it so that it's playable as both a normal tank and as a artillery piece. So that I thought was really cool.
After you were done playing War Stories, you went back to using which tank? I broke my pen.
Well, I started going up. So this is weird. This is an awkward question because I haven't been playing artillery, so I decided to go up the Soviet artillery line. So I played it. I played artillery in PC. In 4 years of console, I didn't have a single artillery valve.
Hey, you know what? Not everyone is artillery.
No.
Our cat producer John Harper, he used to be all about artillery.
Oh, yeah,
I used to
There's
go
a
up to him
handful
for
of people.
artillery questions.
And for all those people who say, and I'm not taking sides in this whole, because I see the conflicts out there. I'm not taking any sides on this, but if you think about it, like about 1 in 5 players is an artillery player, right? Probably 1 in 4, 1 in 5, somewhere around there. So it's not like people don't play artillery, right? And it's a different game. It's a different set of challenges. And so I just, it's really funny because after working on this, I was like, yeah, I really should play more artillery. So I've been climbing up the Soviet artillery line. And that's coincidence, right? I mean, this was a Soviet artillery thing. But yeah, I decided that, maybe I will go up the Soviet artillery line. The Soviets loved artillery. I mean, just from a World War II point of view, it was infantry and artillery were the two hand-in-hand things. Of course, that's more field piece artillery than the self-propelled ones, but yeah, definitely, it's just from a historical point of view also, it's kind of interesting to play Soviet artillery. I'm rambling again.
Hey, sorry for giving you a hard time for knowing this artillery thing. I'm not an arty person.
Yeah.
In fact, I probably have maybe like 20 arty battles because I fail at arty. Even if I wanted to, believe me, I've been trying to get good at arty and I just can't.
It's a different game. I mean, strategic cam already is different, right? But the whole thing is you're playing it differently, and you are supposed to actually. I will say this, right? Because you're supposed to actually keep track of the entire map, because that is your power. Your power is to be everywhere within your gun range at once. It's hard to do because, when you're in a tank battle, you're very focused on the tank. And, in fact, I've done it too, where I'll lose situational awareness in a medium or a heavy tank because I'll be so focused on the fight that I'm in, I'm not noticing that I'm getting flanked or something like that. Well, plus, I'm not a great player, I will admit that, but...
yeah, you are. I've seen some of your games, Irv.
Well, okay, I have my moments, but usually that's because I've managed to achieve strategic breakthrough. Actually, I should talk about that at some point because anyway, we'll get to that subject later. But in any case, the interesting thing with artillery, though, is that you do have to always maintain situational awareness. You have to be always aware of what's going on everywhere on the map, not only for your own self-preservation, but your strength is to be at multiple places at once. And that's a different type of gameplay. It's kind of like aircraft, really. Yeah, so that's the analogy I use.
Dun dun. A couple questions from players not related to War Stories.
Sure.
Jason Storney, more maps. On the Update 4.4 developer stream where Jeff Gregg, who's lead game designer of World Tanks Console, when he was here, he said that in 4.5 the maps will be coming back. He was excited to drop that announcement. So yeah, apologies for the removal of the maps, but we had to do some configurations in-game, which, don't worry, as I mentioned, 4.5, they're coming back.
Yeah.
Tan-ta-tan, where's the April overview? More information about that tomorrow. Can we get a tank destroyer or 2 to cover RD? Are you talking about War Stories? I don't know where that...
Well, there is a tank destroyer war story.
But I think he was talking specifically about Potemkin.
Oh, Potemkin? Oh, you mean if you're playing as artillery? Well, now see, there's some spoilers here. You know what? Let's send a message send the message, and then we'll talk to the level designer, because I'm not the level designer, so I don't want to.
Dang that level designer! I know who he is.
Yeah, Chad. I sit right across. So I sit right next to him.
We have the 3 winners of 14 days of premium, 1 million silver, and 30 consumables.
Awesome.
That's a lot, yes. We're upping up our codes in this stream. That's right, we're high quality. Yeah, production, value and all, it's great. The first winner is Jeremy Allen, and he said connoisseur.
Okay,
And then we have Brian Gang, and he said connoisseur again.
Cool.
And then Johnny Roman, he said Potemkin.
Okay.
Yay, congratulations. You sounded excited. Okay, so now that we have 3 new war stories in individual chapters, a player was kind of curious as to why they were split into 3 different.
Yeah, okay. So that's actually a really good question. We for a long time, we kind of wanted to move around and try to fit other sides of the war into a single war story. And it was very difficult to do. There's some technical reasons why it's hard, and then there's some story reasons why it's a little bit hard to keep changing characters and changing vehicles. So the idea that we had was, hey, let's break this into 3 vignettes. So instead of having a single story with 3 chapters, let's have 3 chapters, each one its own story, and this allows us to come at it from 3 different angles. So we didn't want to make this an Axis or an Ally thing. These are soldiers making decisions, and that was kind of the reason why we kind of split this up this way. And but now we can do it from 3 different sides.
Dun dun. And out of all war stories, now that you worked on every single one of them, excluding the last 3 that were released, which one is your favorite?
I think I still have to go with Kennedy's.
Kennedy's War?
Kennedy's War. Well,
oh no, now he's battling internal demons. I broke Darold, I'm sorry.
I can't decide.
No,
it's I mean,
I like Sea Lion.
Sea Lion's good too. No, see. No,
it's like,
don't ask
say
me
who's your favorite.
Someone asked me, oh yeah, what's your favorite anime?
Who's your favorite son or daughter? Like, I don't know.
It's like, when you have so many, especially something like that, it's like, well, you pick among your kids. I don't think that works. It doesn't work that way.
Let's see. Anthony Bonita Sr., he says that Kennedy's War. He liked Kennedy's War.
Cool topic matter.
Oh, Anthony Maxwell. Darold, how about a war story where you play as an Oni and we have to help the Germans defend Berlin? Oh my God.
So believe it or not, I mean, again, I think I've explained this a couple times, but I totally understand that it takes, like, if I write a story or a story idea, it takes me, probably a couple days of research and everything else, and then it takes the rest of the team months and months to build. So we have a backlog of stories, but then every once in a while there'll be a brainstorming mission. We go, hey, what have we not covered yet, and what have we talked about? All kinds of. You would be, I mean, if we could do some of those war stories, it'd be crazy, because we've actually gone through a bunch of these scenarios. It's like, what if this happened in World War II, or what if we're fighting in this part of the world? And we've really tried to, we've bounced around a lot of these ideas. But we have to pick and choose what kind of fits with overall, like, what tanks are we releasing around that time and everything else. And that kind of pairs down all the options that we have. And so that's kind of the reason why, although we have tons of story ideas, oh my gosh, you should see, I have a page of World War II, all these possible outcomes of World War II. And I even themed them after all the codes for all the different strategies that the U.S. and the UK and everyone else, they have all these things. Someone says Harry Turtledove. I love Harry Turtledove. I know exactly what you're talking about.
John Williams. Let's have a war story with aliens attack Earth.
I can't talk about anything that you're talking about, and I know someone John Williams talked about World War II, and he's talking about Worlds at War, which is a Harry Turtledove series. He is a college professor who writes alternative science fiction. He does a great job. He wrote Guns of the South, and then he did a series called World at War.
It's like dropping knowledge.
So it's
here.
really funny because, John, you're probably a fellow fan. Like, I'm a big fan of Harry Turtledove, and boy, I'd love to do some of those stories. I mean, not just Worlds at War, which is also an awesome story, but there are a couple other storylines that he's done that would also be really, really awesome. Can't talk about that.
Can I drop a suggestion?
Sure.
I wish we could have something in game based on the Ghost Army. I love the Ghost Army.
Okay.
So maybe a war story. I don't know, a challenge, something. The fact that these were men who fought the war without weapons, I was like, I don't know. So how can it be done?
How do you make a tank story about that?
You use fake tanks and strategically put them in maps to...
We have brainstorming sessions like this all the time.
Okay, we're gonna go into like a
no. But honestly, there's ton. Oh my gosh, there's so. Oh. See, I can't talk about them because I don't want people to get people's hopes up because there's some crazy ideas that we've proposed, but again, technical limitations too, right? Like the designer's gonna look at me and go, no. What if we?
How do you think I feel?
No. What if we have no?
Hey, I propose things where I'm like, hey, I need the praying mantis. Nope. And then, God, it was the A7. It's a huge German tank who fits like 18 crew members.
Well, there are a bunch of those land battleships. And then, or the Tsar tank. There's a bunch of weird tanks out there. So
I try, and it's like, no, because it makes sense, some of my suggestions, there's just like, why am I even proposing? I know I'm not going to get a no. But it's always good if you have feedback.
No, please give us feedback. Don't let me discourage feedback. It's just the biggest problem is that we always run into technical limitations. There's lots of things that we'd love to try. Yeah. But like I said, every time we try to push things a little bit, in terms of our technology and develop things incrementally. I mean, all of War Stories was done because we did a series of smaller incremental features. So sometimes people go, why are you working on these features? It's because usually these are the preliminary features for a larger body of functionality that we're trying to do, and it's not always obvious from the individual bits and pieces. And again, I see this all the time in the forums, and I do understand. Well, why aren't you working instead of X instead of Y? It's like, well, there's actually people working on X and Y, but it takes time. Some things takes time, and some things require a balancing because by doing A, sometimes you take away from B. And I know I'm being vague, but there are a lot of features and concepts. Like for instance, I think during Greg's stream, he talked about smoke and things like that.
Oh, the smoke rounds.
And the thing about it is
artillery.
that smoke from a military simulation standpoint sounds really fantastic, but from a gameplay standpoint, it affects our visibility mechanics so much. This is not a trivial thing, and it's not just a question of this is not graphics performance or anything. I mean, that definitely plays into it. Graphics performance is one issue, but there's also all of the tactical and issues that come out. What happens when someone griefs with smoke? How do we deal with all of these aspects? And the fact that it fundamentally changes some aspects of gameplay, you can't do lightly because it can have a severe impact.
This is one of the reasons we don't have a lot of snowstorm or sandstorm maps, because in reality they do affect visibility. Yeah. And it's not that they're not popular, it's just don't want to introduce that much into the game where it's certainly affecting pretty much everyone in the map.
And historically, if the weather was bad like that, you only fought if you really had to, right?
Yeah.
So I mean, it's like one of those things where it's not all of these things. What seems realistic can actually make things less realistic, and there's a lot of considerations. And I know that it's very difficult because when you look at game developers from the outside, it's very easy to make some of these. It gets a lot of these kind of contradictory feelings about it because you go, well, isn't this obvious? And he goes, well, yeah, but then, you know, it's like, you know, you rebalance when, you know, and Jeff Gregg is great. I mean, that's why he's our lead designer. He talks about this stuff all the time. It's like power creeping and all this other stuff. I've seen other, I mean, games that I've loved. Oh, sorry, I didn't mean to tap the mic. But games that I love and other games that I played, when they're not disciplined, I've seen games get destroyed by that. By adding things that you think would make the game better, they can ruin it. And that's something that we have to be very, very careful about. And we make mistakes in that too, right? And we try, but you know, these are the tensions that we have.
If it was earlier in development, it would have been easier, but now that players are accustomed to a certain type of game style, that is a risk. You're always risking to implementing something and then ruining what players are accustomed to it, and if it's, you know, something very different, it will discourage players to kind of want to try.
I just noticed the time. Too bad. I was going to talk about meta strategy and people.
We can pass by a couple minutes.
Okay, well, this is a long argument, but I was gonna delve into this whole subject, but because I've seen this, you know, and this is addressing sort of like a lot of times when I'm playing a game, you'll have people go on and on about how, well, this guy's an idiot because he went to the west side of the map, or he went to the east side of the map, or something like that. The interesting thing is, combat is perceived as being very, you know, like strategy and everything else is being perceived as fairly kind of absolute, and that there's a right answer. The interesting thing about tactics and strategy is that's exactly not the case, right? Like anticipation of strategy and the fact that everyone always says this is the right thing to do means sometimes doing the wrong thing is the right thing, right? So, because, you know, for instance, I've watched this many, many times where everyone says, oh, you shouldn't go to this part of the map because if you go there, you'll lose. What's interesting about that is, so everyone goes to one side of the map, no one covers the other side of the map. One or two people who go, well, I'm not going to listen to that. I know that if I can break through, they'll go up there and they'll flank it. They'll go into the rear areas, kill all the artillery guys, and then basically attack from behind and cause TDs and, so, you know, guys who are directional to have to turn around or break position, or cause lights that were doing something to have to do something else. And then, even if that player, as an individual in terms of KDR, didn't do that well, he can really help his side. So that's something I want to talk about, because that's actually the basis of strategy, right? Actually, I had this long thing where I was going to talk about Clausewitz. I was going to talk about
We can bring you back. Oh my God, we'll definitely bring you back.
Yeah,
don't worry about that.
I don't want to bore people because. Well,
actually, Anthony Maxwell is saying, Rybud, can I get Darold in a PlayStation Network party chat? I would love to talk to him. So that totally defeats what you just said.
Okay, well, yeah, but anyway, yeah, I mean, well, not everybody wants to hear about Sun Tzu.
Who wants to talk to Darold?
Clausewitz, right? But I mean, it's just that, you know, it's really interesting that, you know, a lot of things that drive tactics and strategy, especially kind of armchair strategy and tactics, it's 200 years old. And
Michael Bryant, yes, thank you, Darold.
Oh yeah, so about this whole, yeah, you know, it's like, and I understand. People are really concerned about their KDRs and everything else. I totally get that, right? Because that's one of the reasons why we play. But sometimes the satisfaction of figuring out that the other guy followed the playbook, and because they followed the playbook, you can take advantage of that. That feels really, really good. So sometimes these players who everyone's saying are clueless actually might, well, now sometimes they're really clueless.
There is a couple
I will
view.
not deny that. And a couple times I thought I was doing the right thing and I was potatoing. So I admit I've done that. I've done that too.
That's the quote of the day. I was potatoing.
That's right. This is the right. Oh no. And what that also means is that, like, you're testing their flank, and no, they actually had a guard there, so I screwed up. Or, oh, I got to retreat, right? I mean, so that's how it is. But if they leave the flank open and you can exploit it, that's really cool. That's what Blitzkrieg is. That's why armored warfare is, you know, that's why tanks fighting on the battlefield are a thing, right? Is because of Blitzkrieg, not because of trench warfare, you know? Anyway, that's... I'm sorry. That's I just got off on that.
No, this is all part of the stream.
I hear stuff when I'm playing all the time, and I'm also biting my tongue because I'm not gonna say anything. But yeah, I mean, but if everyone does it, then it's not gonna work either, because that's just chaos. So there's in modern military combat. See, I said I wasn't going to do it, but you know, there's the idea of the pin force and then the idea of the hook force, right? So you have, you know, a group of your military that's being used to tie down enemy forces, and then you have another group that's actually trying to exploit the flank. The only problem, and this is great because, you know, everyone always says, yes, that's exactly how military tactics work. The other problem is the other guy knows that too, and the other guy's trying to do the same thing to you. So it's kind of a weird cat and mouse game where you're making judgment calls on this kind of stuff all the time.
So I guess the call we're going to have with you, it's going to be Call It Tips with Darold. That's what Elmer Rogan stated.
Anyway.
Hey, I like this.
Okay.
Stephen O'Muir, Rybot, what are you writing down? I'm actually writing down questions and names, and because, of course, Darold is sharing his feedback, so I don't want to lose any questions that you guys would like to ask. But yeah, I mean, we are actually out of time. Oh, for the people that want the codes, all you have to do is stick around after the stream, and I will send you a message via Facebook. So
we
you can get the
do
codes.
need to wrap this up so we can send out those codes, man.
Yeah.
Make sure you get your prize.
But we totally need to schedule this call with Tips with Darold. We have to have
I
a
don't know if
segment.
it's
We have now a segment called Tips with Darold.
No,
I love this.
I was going to go on and on about strategy, but maybe that's...
No, hey, this is great. I mean, players obviously love listening to you and what you have to
it's
say.
not specifically tank related, right? And you know, it doesn't always translate directly to the tank, and it doesn't make you a better tanker. I will say, honestly, because if you look at my KDR, it's pretty terrible. But I do love. I tell you that as a medium player, one of the greatest satisfactions is figuring out that they didn't have a defensive line and doing the sneaky sneaks. Girls and Panzer reference. Sneaky sneaks and get into the rear areas and really mess things up by going after the TDs and they're forced to turn around and stuff like that. That is so satisfying. Oh.
And with that, we're going to finish this.
Okay, sorry, I got carried away.
Thank you so much for everyone watching Weekly Assault. Next week, we are going to have Platoon with the Developer session on Wednesday at 12:30 Central Time with me, so watch me fail. It's great. And then on Thursday, we are going to have, again, Weekly Assault, 3 p.m. Central Time on Facebook. Dr. Darold Higa, thank you so very much for joining us again.
Thanks a lot.
Players love listening to everything you have to say.
Thank you for being patient. I know I can ramble on and on and on, but anyway, I appreciate it.
Don't forget that Update 4.4 is out. We have new war stories, the introduction of Prokhorovka Winter, a map variant. We did base capture changes, and we also have other goodies in there, so make sure you go into our portal to check the patch notes, console.worldtanks.com. My name is Rybot01, and I'll see you next week.
The year is 1947. Germany reigns. The war never ended. History has changed, and it's time to fight back. Prepare for a war experience like no other. Immerse yourself in an epic campaign and finish the fight in 3 unique stories. Rewrite history. War Stories, Spoils of War.